So let's get started. Hello and welcome to today's Baatein session. My name is Rahi Deroy. I'm a master's first year student at NID Ahmedabad. I'm studying graphic design. And so Baatein is basically a student initiative where, Baatein, the word Baatein translates to conversations in Hindi. And we have various speakers who come and share with us, give us some insight into their process, their motivations, and tell us about their work, basically. So today we have with us Sonata Dev. She is a multidisciplinary or a transdisciplinary designer and an alumnus of NID Gandhinagar and also NIFT, if I'm not wrong. And yeah, and she's done a lot of interesting work in the field of speculative design, UI, UX, amongst many other things, although she started out in textile design. So I'm very curious to know the arc of that journey and to know a little bit more about your work and what drives you. So we're really excited to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. And let's get right into it. And to everybody watching, thank you for joining. And do keep a track of your questions. We'll have some time for questions at the end. So please feel free to ask questions at that time. Okay. Hi, welcome. I'll just get into it with my first question.
Let me start off by really thanking the Baatein team and also you, Rai, for inviting me into this space and giving me a platform to share my thoughts with my own alma mater. This feels great. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. You've described yourself as a multidisciplinary or a transdisciplinary designer. So what does this term mean to you, and how do you sort of make it work across different disciplines?
I think everything that we do is in some way multidisciplinary or transdisciplinary. You can't have you can't take one direction and fly off into it. You need it to tie into other disciplines. For me personally, what I found is that I really enjoy connecting the dots between things. And maybe that's what translated into this multidisciplinary approach. Finding a common thread is, of course, something that we want to do with almost everything in our lives. And I think, especially in the field of design, you need to be aware of at least what's going on in a lot of fields and how these things can impact each other. So as to at least, be empathetic with design and also be able to understand what the impact of the things that you create are.
Right.
Am I in the ballpark?
No. So from what I understand, it's more about following through the entire process instead of just doing a little part of it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
I would put it like this, that see, if I'm a physicist, let's say, and I have a friend who's a doctor and I have another friend who's a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
So the individual output that each of these three people are going to have, I think that if you put their abilities, some of their abilities together, then you'll be able to create something that probably did not exist before. And it's these collaborations that create mostly all the completely new things that we know, and especially it's going to be relevant for a large number of people. So that's my take on it, that if you converge worlds, then something really crazy comes out of it. Yeah.
Right. I think it was the Italian designer Massimo Vignelli, right, who said that if you can design one thing, you can design everything. So what's your take on that statement? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's very valid. And I think everyone, as a human being, we are born designers. Like the aspect that is there of continuously adapting to your environment and also changing it, that has been there since the stages of early man and all. And we just need to look further into ourselves and to the world around us to be able to become designers, so to speak.
Right.
Even the fuchkawala at the end of our gully is a designer because he has understood what system works for him, right? So everybody is already a designer, and I think design mostly is a way of thinking or a process of thought rather than anything else.
Right.
Yeah.
So you
I agree with you.
You just mentioned about early man, so I also want to use that as a segue to talk about your early life, early Sonata, if you will. Where did you grow up, and what was the atmosphere around, and did that sort of those roots or the culture of the place or the atmosphere you grew up in affect your work in any way, or do you see it shaping your creative process in any way?
Environment. Okay, so I spent most of my childhood in Bhubaneswar.
I see.
And at the time that I used to live there, it was like a very, very, it wasn't really a metro city of sorts. The first swimming pool turned up when I was in class 8 or something. So I think one of the things that very much did impact me in my childhood years was television. I did have access to some of that. So, and I used to watch a lot of varied content. And some of those things really left a lasting impact. Like I remember watching the Truman Show, that movie,
Uh-huh.
when I was in probably 5 or 6. And there are some of these things that really make you think and they stick with you. So maybe that was one of the things. And school. School was a great, I mean, it was probably the platform to, satisfy all your human curiosities, because that's the place where there are so many worlds colliding together. And I think I learned a lot from there. I think I learned to express a lot from
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but I don't know. I haven't really thought in a great detail about how my cultural roots have, found their expression in my practice of design. But what
Mhm.
I do understand is that this whole environment, which encourages people to speak freely and challenge each other, I think I do enjoy that a lot. So I probably try to have those elements in whatever I do.
Yeah, you sound like somebody who enjoyed school. So, in school, did you have any opportunities to express yourself creatively, or did you always know that you were going to go into a creative field?
So way back when I was in school, I wasn't aware that there is a creative field. My parents are both physicists,
Okay.
so it was. I think I think there was. I used to have these sketchbooks, like lots of sketchbooks. I wouldn't call them sketchbooks. They were diaries that we inherited from some place or the other, and I have them full of like sketches of clothing because I was into that big time.
Right.
So, and then I think last year or a couple of years ago, we all visited home again. We were checking out like these notebooks, and I found this. I found this form that we had made, that I had made, about something called a skeleton replacement therapy, which was, enabling you to customize like 3-inch waist and all. It was a critique on people trying to be thin. And this was something I made when I was in what, class 3 or something. I think
Yeah.
those indications have been there, but I haven't really noticed it. And this is the time when I'm exploring it, trying to understand what worked.
Right.
And school used to be a lot of fun for me because I'm an only child. So all all the human interaction that I get is from school.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I used to be involved in like every extracurricular activity that was possible.
I think if you
We
were
start.
able to take your third grade project forward, you would find many takers for it today. If you were to actually make that into a technology. So it was a great idea, I think. um, so after school, you did your bachelor's at NIFT, right? So tell us a little bit about that experience. What were your interests? What were your areas of concern there?
Mm-hmm. So about NIFT, one of the first and primary objectives, I didn't know that design as a field, what were the possibilities. I
Mhm.
just knew what fashion design was, and I
Okay.
found it very interesting. Okay. So at the time of choosing disciplines, I came across these two very, very interesting ones. One is fashion design, which I already like, and the other is communication design. So then I chose fashion design. I entered NIFT, and it was like an opening up of all sorts of possibilities. So what I used to do is, apart from my own course, I had a lot of friends in communication. So I
Mhm.
used to do their assignments as well, with them. Because अब एक course का पैसा में if you get two course का training, why not? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think I used to do that a lot, and I figured out during those times that I enjoyed graphic design as well, and the whole spectrum of communication, where it's like a little bit of understanding people and a little bit of making people understand. So that's the kind of space that I always wanted to be in. And I think eventually, after going through the whole process of NIFT, I had a little bit more insight about design as a process itself. And then when I joined work, this curiosity started shaping up a little further. And it was a nice space to be in. It was, at that stage in life where your world of possibilities has just opened up, and you meet so many different kinds of people, and you get to know that, oh, there are so many worlds out there.
Right. Were you working between your bachelor's and your master's, or you went to do your master's degree?
Yeah. I was working as a apparel designer for 2 years, I think. Okay. Around 2 years.
Okay. And then you went to do your master's in new media design at NID Gandhinagar. So tell us a little bit about your experience there, and what is really meant by new media design. What does it entail?
Oh, you've asked the question, haven't you? So new media design, actually new media design is something that students and faculties and everybody who is associated with the field has been trying to answer. What is new media design? I'll try to attempt and answer this to the best of my understanding. So the way that I see it is that new media is something that resonates very well with people who are in love with possibilities. So at the time when I was working and I decided to take up this course at NID, the thing that appealed to me about it was, like, there was this angle of understanding emergent technologies, understanding emergent social phenomena, and then how things are going to be. And then as a designer, you also have a certain degree of concern and control and imagination of the way things are going to be. And I thought that this was a good space to be in. Also the multidisciplinary angle that you were talking about in the beginning. So, combining different realms of society or economy or as such, these things. I agree that new media is vague in terms of its definition, but that's kind of the charm of it. You don't have too many rigid boundaries to define yourself in. It is more of a discovery of possibilities. That's the way that I would put it. And it's in that sweet spot between imagination and communication and creation. So that is bang on where I want it to be, however broad it might be. So,
yeah, I think you did a great job of explaining it. Like, you should be the ambassador for new media design. So I'm also curious to know about your grad project, like the final project that you had to do. What did you work on, or what were your areas of interest?
So my grad project, which took a really long time to finish. By the way, this is for everyone who is currently doing their grad projects. Do not lose your hope. You're going to get there. It's a very, very difficult process, and it's something that makes you discover more about yourself than probably anything else that I have ever gone through. So my grad project was about drawing plausible metaphors between food consumption and information consumption. And, I mapped the whole spectrum. It was a long project. My doc itself was around 280 pages. So the final outcomes that emerged from that were kind of critical design or speculative design artifacts. And in a slightly humorous way, they express the kind of possibilities that the trends that we have today, like, let's say, for example, eating and watching together, as a phenomenon. How these trends might play out and scale and grow into certain phenomena a few years from now. And how could we design smarter systems around information consumption by borrowing from the structures of food that already exist. Like, for example, you have like an elaborate system of nutrition labels and, a lot of study about understanding the impact of how certain ingredients affect your health.
Huh.
So if we could draw the same parallels into information, we already have things like ratings or trigger warnings and things like that.
Right.
So we have the potential of scaling a system into information for which a precedent already exists. And it was kind of about that and the application.
Wow,
But for more details,
to see your Behance, right? I think we lost you for a second there. All right. So for more details,
yeah,
please, to refer to your Behance.
sure.
Okay, sure. And also, this sounds like a really interesting field, and I'm sure there's a lot of interesting work that's happening in this field. So maybe you could tell us about some of the designers or artists working in this area whose work you find interesting and you would like to share with us.
Oh, well, that's actually a very difficult question because while I was doing my project, the biggest insight that I found is that the availability of information is not a problem, but the curation of it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, you would be very hard pressed to find like your grandmother's special halwa recipe that, nobody's really making these days.
Huh.
You have a plethora of options right now. Swiggy Pay, you can order whatever you want. But if you are looking for something very specific, it's very difficult to find. So I find that the kind of spaces that I like to work in terms of design, it's difficult to get to them. I have to start following a lot of rabbit holes to get to these ends, especially if I'm looking on the internet. Some designers that I do really admire in the space of speculative design and the kind of work they're doing, do check out somebody called Bijon Carman, Anab Jain, of course, from Superflux. In terms of projects, I have like a few. That there was something called Project Alias. If you can find that out, that was really cool. Who else? Black Mirror. It's a series, but then it is what speculative design is about.
It's on Netflix,
every episode of Black. Yeah. Charlie Brooker, Netflix, Black Mirror, all episodes. I think.
Yeah. Okay, great. I think that's a great curation for people to follow up on. So you mentioned about this issue of having a plethora of information and then sort of having to navigate your way through it. That's definitely, one of the challenges that we face as students or even as designers today. So even in your journey as a designer across disciplines, what have been some of the challenges that you've faced, and how have you approached those problems?
You're talking specifically about challenges that I've faced as a designer in the industry?
Yeah, but also any other challenges that as a student or something you can share about those as
well. Well, as a student, I think I want to take this question in this way, that as a student, we are allowed, or so to say, we are kind of led to believing that we can just let our imagination free and do whatever we want. But the moment you step out of the sphere of being a student and go into, let's say, something that's going to pay you, you find out that the world is very different.
Right.
And that you're not prepared for it. You're not prepared for convincing people who are only concerned about numbers. You're not prepared to manage your finances. You're not prepared to do your own taxes. So I think those little basics that even building your brand, for example. So the career options that you might have after you have done. Those things I think were very unclear when we leave college. And I don't know if it would have worked out better if I, let's say, had a better idea of what I could do. But right now, maybe a couple of years after leaving, I've had the time to reflect and figure things out, to understand what it is that I love, what is it that the world needs more of, or at least I think it needs more of. And I think we've discovered that it's a lot about balance and not about being extreme about any one thing. One of the biggest challenges as a UX designer or a UX UI designer, somebody who is let's say building digital products, is that design is the least important thing right now that is considered even now. And you have to evangelize it a little too much. So you have to be in the face to everyone all the time about it, that design is important. And sometimes that gets a little frustrating. And in terms of the speculative design practice, it is, it's an emergent concept, and it's also not something that's easy to communicate. So whenever I'm telling someone about what it is that I do, I find that it is a struggle, especially when someone's imagination is not really with them at the moment. It's very difficult to communicate what it is about. So I think those are like really major challenges that I still am figuring out how to overcome.
Right. UI UX is such a sort of a trending thing right now. Every second person in design one hears is sort of involved in it. And yet it sounds like a little bit of an obscure thing. It sounds a little odd also. So to the lay person, when you say UI UX, many people don't really know what you're talking about. So how do you sort of explain to them?
I think UX and UI are relatively simpler to explain, but it did take me some time to, arrive at that perfect combination of how to express it.
Do you
there is
have
an article I have written.
an elevator pitch, or do you have a set thing that you explain?
Yeah. So what I like to tell people is that right now everybody's familiar with all these kind of digital services, apps, websites, etc., etc.
Right.
So what I like to tell them is that personally, for me, I work at a startup which helps. I work at a company that helps startups build their products. Okay. So what I tell people usually is that, let's say that a certain system exists offline. Like, for example, you give your clothes to your dhobi, and the dhobi takes it and he washes it, he irons it, comes back to you. He gives you a receipt that this much is the amount that you have to pay me, and you pay them that amount. So for every process like that exists, I assist in bringing that system online somehow. That is how I define the way that I do things. That helps, communicate it for, anybody who asks me what I do. But this is not, of course, UX specific. It is specific to my work. And in terms of UX, UI, what these fields are and what they mean, I have written a small, cringy explainer article on Medium. So you can definitely check that out. It contains an interesting metaphor about how the relationship is between chefs who are currently busy in the kitchen. So that's like a UI space. And then, the reflective process of thinking about how we are going to optimize the system or how we're going to plan the menu. So yeah, do check it out.
Sure. I mean, we'll try to link it on the Baatein stories or something as well for everybody to have a look at that article.
Sure.
Yeah. You spoke about sort of this design school and then coming out and then sort of facing the reality of the industry, so to speak. So you've actually been, you've had a formal design education. You were at NIFT and then NIT, both premier institutes. So what do you think is sort of the role or the value that an institutional design education brings? I mean, I'm sure you would have worked with people who've not had a formal design training also. So do you think that it's something that's necessary, or what is sort of the role?
I don't think it's necessary. I think even at NID, a lot of our journey, a lot of the things that we learned were in fact self-learning and peer learning. So I think the real value that institutions create is actually not the academic facilities they provide or the curation of courses, but it's actually the curation of people. So the one thing that I found very fascinating about my life at NID was the curation of people around me. It helped me understand how differently people think, and I think that's something that's very important. So in terms of skills, in terms of learning skills, any course that you take, let's say online, or even if you discover something, you play with the software and you get better at something. I don't think that you need a institute technically to do that. But in terms of let's say growing a certain mindset, in terms of questioning your ideologies, in terms of having a safe space to have dialogue without being vulnerable, all of those things I think are good opportunities provided by institutions. And also on the other side, if the institute is not providing those things, if that's not happening, then there's no point of having a formal structure. So
Right. That's an
I
interesting way
I, be,
looking
I
at it.
believe a lot in the workshop model of things, where where you get to choose what it is that interests you, and you get to collaborate with the people who have the same kind of interests. So that's the good part. Admin, not so much.
Right. So you did your bachelor's in textile design, and you mentioned that it was because in fashion and apparel, is it? Right.
Yeah, fashion design.
So, and you mentioned because that was sort of the closest connect you had to design at that time. But I'm curious to know that later in your work, was there any sort of a callback to things that you had done in your bachelor's, or did you completely shift away from that?
Actually, yeah, I did have I had an interest in the area of smart textiles and wearables when I moved into like this new media kind of realm. So it does have some overlaps with the kind of work that I did later. However, I felt like that was like kind of a gateway, you know. Let's say that you are trying out Italian cuisine for the first time, and you have only had pasta, and that somehow, it gives you like little um, a little teaser into the kind of flavors and um, the kind of taste that you might expect. So fashion design as a course at that point for me was a teaser trailer into the whole field of design.
Right.
And and what I discovered is that design as a process is not something that I can only apply to textiles or fashion. In fact, it can be scaled to so many ways that I can get back to like being a core fashion designer at any point I want. So right now I want like a divergence rather than a convergence. And it worked out.
I've noticed that you have an interest in food as a concept or as a topic, and even right now you use the metaphor of food to explain something. So, is that one of your interests, and what are sort of your other interests that feed into, to use another food metaphor, your design practice?
Very interesting use of feed into, yeah. So you're absolutely right. I'm a big time foodie. I love to eat, and sometimes I like to cook as well. That is also something that I think grew during the pandemic. Food, I think, is something that everybody relates to so well that food metaphors kind of work really well. So I think I've like kind of incorporated that into my whole being. I also did like a workshop called Food Futures last year around this time with NID Haryana, and that resulted in some phenomenal student output. So I'm very interested in this whole space of food as well as of futures. So I thought of combining these two together. Apart from that, I'm very interested in music. I think so, and mostly in the space of improv. Like it's not like I'm a playback singer or anything like that. But I really like getting people together and jamming. We do that very often. And I think that's been like a consistent thread in my life. And I enjoy performing like all sorts of stage performances. I'm an MC sometimes. It's actually very interesting that I'm like a guest in this session because I've always been on the other side as the host.
Yeah.
And give me a mic and I like it.
Great. I'm just trying to think of some way to get you to sing in this live. I'll get to it. Probably, I'm hoping that some of the questions will be requests for music, and then I'll be able to pressurize you into singing on the live.
I'll tell you something interesting. So, in new media design, after every jury, we used to now flip the tables. And then the jury members would become one of us, and we would engage them in some session that is completely impromptu and will throw them off their radar. And we would
Wow.
always have like these, yeah, we would have these parties and we would have music. And if 2 or 3 people could get together, we would do improv lines about them in a song format.
Oh, wow.
So we would talk, yeah, we would like basically lightly roast every one of them. But since it's all like in a good vibe, it was super
Do you
chill.
remember any of those roasts? I would love to hear one. At all?
It's all so spontaneous.
Huh.
It's all so spontaneous that I have no recollection of any of this. But somebody somewhere from my match would have a video somewhere.
Okay. Try to get a hold of the archives. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds like a fun thing to do, though. All right. I think we are coming to the latter end of our session. So I have a very important question that I still need to ask you, which is what are your thoughts on building a better speculative design process in the context of business or education?
Okay. That is a very loaded question, first of all. I think speculative design as a process is relatively new.
Huh.
And because it is relatively new, we have kind of the power and the ability and the responsibility to shape the way that it, it grows further. There is, the current narrative of speculative design is, I think, very, very Eurocentric. And the work that is happening in indigenous speculative and critical design, I think it needs to grow and see a little more light of day. In terms of process, there are some very key insights that I have learned, especially not just through my practice, but especially by taking workshops where I introduce this concept to students. I recently took an open elective course called Future of HCI. And from all of these things, what I have discovered is that the tools and methods exist. And then there is some connection, to futuring and to the trend extrapolation. And let's say to future studies as a subject, like let's say simulations, aided AI simulations. And then there is an angle of kind of ethical design to it as well. Because by the output, you are trying to somehow have your audience question practices of today and how it might lead into the future. So all of these aspects, in my opinion, are like extremely important. And as a process, if we can like kind of modularize and put together the whole thing, like there are parts to it. I'll get into a little deep. Do we have like 5 minutes?
Yeah, go for it. More than 5 minutes.
So there's like this one part which is the initiation, which is about knowing what's going on and about being able to identify certain trends. So it can be like macro trends, mega trends, weak signals, and it's basically like a curation of picking up what do you think has the possibility of scaling. So that's one part of it. Then the next thing is where you introduce like all these tools, and again the whole world is trying to come up with how to sift this information and express it. So you've got things like headlines, day in the life, and the cone of future possibilities. You've got the pestle framework and all of these things. And I keep collecting a few of these. And these are just tools to like kind of help you organize your entire imaginations of what ifs, provide them the necessary grounding, and then kind of build a narrative that can be communicated well. And so that's the third part.
Right.
So the communication part of it is also like extremely important, and I like to focus it on these two aspects, which is believability and inhabitability. If you've got those two things down, then I think you can have like a really good speculative design project. So, for example, one of the student groups right now from my most recent workshop, they came up with the concept of these like electronic robotic mosquitoes, like half mosquito, half robot kind of things that are being used as a system to vaccinate people. So yeah, it makes you do like a turn in your head, right?
Yeah.
And there's this whole system around it. Okay, so we have like a tracking application around it. We have this system Okay, we have the actual render of the thing, how the modules can be replaced, how it's hygienic to have, one person, one moxie so that the needle issues don't happen. And then the healthcare workers are also not exposed to things. So like it's a whole spectrum of system design, but set in a near future state where you don't have to limit yourself to existing technologies.
Right.
And I think that's a really good way to think forward. Science fiction is also like in that realm. And the way that you express it, so I'll give you a demonstration. So these people, when they came to me with the output, okay, this is what we have done.
Huh.
So the way of expressing it was that there's this cabinet meeting happening of like the health minister and technology minister and all of these people, and they are pitching like the next version of Moxies. They used to have a Mockus which had some issues, and they were only doing a certain number of vaccinations. And this is like the updated version, and they are, with the slideshow, they are pitching that how this is going to be better and how you're going to get more efficient. And I think that kind of context placement really helps you get into that situation and believe that, okay, this is possible. So, yeah, I think
So
examples are always a better
theater involved in the presentation as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So a little, it could be, it could not be a presentation as well. Since currently everything is happening online, we have to limit the medium of expression a little bit. It could be like an exhibition of artifacts. It could be just, some headlines or some articles or something like that. But it's basically, the overarching concept is that you create some evidences of something that seems like something's happening now or previously happened, but it's set in the future.
Right.
So that is the kind of put yourself in,
right,
as a medium of expression.
Yeah. But that is,
and of course, you can see that
combining,
I'm so excited about.
Mosquitoes and vaccines. I'm going to follow up my loaded question with another loaded question, which is, what do you think makes a good designer? What are the qualities that one should hone in order to be a better designer, according to you? Or what are some essential qualities that a designer should have?
Who even is qualified to make that distinction? Like, what makes a good designer?
Or to put it in a different way, what have you observed are some of the qualities that good designers have?
I think I would definitely say being open to new things, for sure. Designers should be open to anything, like however wild it might seem. Try and understand why somebody is talking about it. Listening is a very key skill, I think, for a designer. So as far as I have found, listening, of course, comes with empathy. Without empathy, though, you cannot place yourself in someone else's shoes, which is, I think, very key for being a designer. A lot of designers get a little distracted when they suddenly get into the industry and realize that everything has to align to business goals. So I think having some sort of a business mindset would also help. And when it comes to defining what it is that you do and what it is, where exactly in the whole spectrum of design you fit in, what I find is that there are 3 stages that comprise the whole process of design. So there's the planning stage, there's the creation or making stage, and then there's the communication stage. So I think a designer could probably lie anywhere on that spectrum. And the more you understand what your space is, the better you'll be able to hone your particular abilities and, be able to express what kind of a designer you are, and you'll get better
at it. Right. Yeah.
But what makes design primarily, I think, is also about having curiosity. I think that's what drives great design, first of all. Asking questions repeatedly over and over and not stopping at all.
Yeah. You spoke earlier also about sort of following rabbit holes and that sort of being the thing that guides your journey as a designer. So to do that, curiosity would be a prerequisite, I think. All right, that's it from my end. But before I open the floor for questions, I just want to ask if there's any other projects that you would like to talk about, anything you would like to share with us.
I think on a Sunday afternoon, I think people have heard enough right now about projects. So I'm not going to talk about any more projects. I just want to leave it at this note that I believe a lot in the potential of speculative and critical design as a field of design. And I think I will constantly keep trying to grow this and evangelize this. So I do take workshops and I do like to sort of push this idea forward. So if anybody is like anybody wants to do any interesting collaborations or follow up on this, just do let me know. I'm always ready to have like a chai and talk about speculative design. So yeah, I think that's all. We can open it to questions.
All right, thank you so much, Sonata. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. And thank you for your very extensive answers. Though I was the host, I was feeling like taking notes in the middle. But thankfully, this whole thing is being recorded and will be up. So I will also be going back to some of the things you said because I think they really need another hearing to sink in. So thank you so much for sharing with us. And yeah, it was really lovely speaking with you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Rai. I think when I speak to people, I also pay a lot of attention to how much they're listening, and you have been hanging on to every word. You're like, you have remembered things from our previous conversations. I think you are going to be a good designer.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'll invite people to ask questions. We already have some questions. Okay, somebody is asking, what are your thoughts on creating a screen that adjusts itself to power of lens? Hence, no need for specs. Okay, what are your thoughts on this idea?
That's an interesting idea. I think so. When you go for an eye testing, there's this machine that you put your chin onto, if anyone has been there, and then what it does is that it shifts the focal length of the screen to tell you what kind of power you have. So I think if you are interested in doing something like that, you can look into that particular sort of technology, and you can probably appropriate that into something that sounds like the concept that you are telling about. Apart from that, lenses, specs, I enjoy wearing them. So if I would, I've had them since I was in class 1. So there might be like a number of good alternative ways. Like, for example, if you're looking at, let's say, a Google Class type of thing emerging at some point, then that might automatically adjust to your power, to your eye power. And with screens, I believe that a particular challenge that you might face might be that what if like 500 people are viewing that screen together, or even 2 people, and they have different eye powers, then it has to be like individually calibrated. I don't know how you'd adjust it, but it's surely something to look into.
Correct.
Mohamaya.
Another question. It says, I am a UX designer with a BDes degree. People in the industry show a lot of businessy side rather than design. And then, do you think a master's is important so I can change this in the industry? I am interested in SDM.
Interested in SDM as in, are you currently pursuing it, or? Okay, let me try to break your question down a little bit. You have a bachelor's of design and you're currently working in a company where you see that you have to push for business insights. I'm hoping that I'm, getting in the correct place
that is
that
what
you are.
I said. Yeah. I'm a UX degree. Yeah.
So there are 2 ways of thinking about this. If you ask my humble opinion, that I don't think that you require another degree to prove your worth as somebody who's contributing to the business. But what will help is being tactful and learning and understanding and not being confrontational. So if you're gonna try and talk to people and bring them to your terms, that might not help too much. Instead, if you try and understand what their motivations are, behind something. Like, let's say, for example, there is a particular metric that they want to maximize. Try and find out why that is there. And you have to, as you know, as it goes with every good storyteller, as it goes with everything that you design, even in terms of UX, what you do is that you keep the user in mind. So just, UX the whole process, treat your stakeholders as your users, and then design your pitches, the kind of communication that you can do with them accordingly. And if you're interested in SDM, I would 100% recommend that course, because it is phenomenal. It is like what you can do between a design and an MBA, and it's going to help you a lot if you want to get into strategy roles. Go for it.
Great. Okay, another question. What are your thoughts on the scope of design in the Metaverse environment? Roop Vectra has asked this.
The Metaverse as an environment requires a lot of design. I mean, if you're going to be a designer, and as a designer, what do? We build worlds, right? So Metaverse is just an opportunity to build a world out there. So there are so many levels of scope. Like, for example, just if you pick up the topic of storytelling, like we were discussing a little while ago, the fact that the universe is all around you gives you so many points of interactions. And there's like this whole spectrum of how would you design the direction of attention of someone who is in the experience. So I think that is one of the, in terms of interaction design, I think that's one of the really big key spaces to look at. That in terms of narrative design, when you move out of a 2D plane and go into a whole 3D atmosphere, how do you direct the attention of a user? And as it scales, in the metaverse into a more multi-sensory experience, you'll have even more ways to do that. So it's a really good space to try and understand.
Okay. We have some thank yous. Okay.
Thank you very much for
one more question. Last one. Hi, Sonata. I'm a student from NID. How can you practice design in isolation far away from college?
Oh, tricky question. I don't think it's possible to practice design in isolation at all. But if you are isolated and in a certain kind of space, I don't think that we should restrict ourselves to communicating only with a certain kind of people. I would encourage you to look at whatever environment is available to you and generally discuss whatever you are doing with other people around. Let's say, even if it is your parents or your family or your house help or the chai wala on the road or auto rickshaw, whoever it might be, because human connection is not something that it's hard to come by in the times that we live in. And every opportunity that we get for it, I think it kind of really helps us build a certain, I don't know how to put it. It's integral. It's integral as a designer to be able to communicate and to be able to share. So even if it's somebody else just telling you their story, try and be interested in that. And I understand that it's a really bad situation that you can't go to college, but things are going to get really, really much better soon. And until then, just try and hold on. Try and find out some interests that you can pursue on your own. And definitely remember to share things with people. Don't be afraid. Just put yourself out there. Nothing can break you. Just talk to people. Just put yourself out there. You'll feel vulnerable the first few times, but I think you're going to like it eventually.
Right. Okay. I think that's it for the questions. Once again, thank you so much on your Sunday afternoon also for spending this time with us. I think it's been very valuable for everybody watching, and I'm sure there'll be many other people coming back to it. So yeah, just before I end, I just wanted to ask, in case there is anything musical that you would that you could share with us, just maybe a line or two. and we could end on that note. On that note. Yeah.
No. Okay. Damn. You're making me nervous. Okay, so first let me finish my piece. Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you everybody who joined. Word of casual advice just for all of you. Do what matters. And what matters is like something that we are going to define for ourselves. And on a musical note, kya karna hai? So I like to flow with whatever is there in my surroundings. So I can just make up a song about what's there on my table and I can sing it for you. That's fine.
That'd be amazing.
Okay. Okay, so let's start. Hey everybody, I got a pen stand on my table. I'm not singing to you as a part of a fable. I'm a designer, but I don't know what it means. I'm giving a Baatein and I'm popular, it seems. Thank you, Ram, for having me here today. And for everyone else, let's get on with our day.
Too good, too good. I loved it. I really think this should be the official Baatein jingle. Henceforward, I'm going to push for this. Thank you so much. And see you. I'll be in touch with you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks for
Bye.
having me. Bye.
Yeah.